This quote that she said stuck with me, and it was like, no one will provide better agency or advocacy better than myself.
What's up, standouts? It's Yolanda, and welcome to the first episode of my show. Woohoo! I'm interviewing my friend, Miki Reynolds, who is the Executive Director of a community development nonprofit called Grid110. In this episode, we talk about how she used Twitter to help her land a job with a dream company. We also talk about what weightlifting means to her. And then we also talk about the steps she took to figure out the type of job she wanted after being laid off from a job she had been at for over 6 years. This is a really fun, cool conversation. We recorded this episode in not the best location, so please forgive me that the audio quality isn't better. And now, without further ado, let's start the show.
My name is Miki Reynolds. I am a Los Angeles-based nonprofit educational community developer and have recently landed in working for a nonprofit that I co-founded a few years ago, supporting startups and founders here in downtown Los Angeles. I think that's the great thing about what I've seen in the past few years is that there are pockets of kind of tech startup entrepreneurial communities here in LA, and everybody thinks everything is on the west side. Companies like Snapchat have definitely established that, but there are definitely pockets of communities, whether it's in Culver City, downtown LA is growing, Pasadena has been, very strong in that area for a while. And so I think that people can live in different areas and hopefully find something accessible to them, right? And I think that's been the work that I've been doing for the past 3+ years now, has been to bring resources and community to where people actually are so that they don't feel like they have to go out of their way to find something that interests them.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about your early years? You grew up in LA.
No, Bay Area. Yeah. So I was born in Santa Barbara, lived there for 5 years, and then my family moved to the Bay Area, and I lived there high school and then left to come down to LA for college. So did a little bit of everything. I was the overachieving kid. My mom's Japanese, and so she's not traditional tiger mom, but it was always like, I want you to do everything. I want you to get into really good school. My dad was in the Navy and then went into sales, and he was kind of like, do whatever makes you happy. And I think he was kind of a hippie in his own right. Neither of my parents went to college, and so the expectations for me, more heavily on my mom's side, was like, do everything that you can, be a well-rounded student, get straight A's. My dad was like, if you want to travel the world, that's totally fine. So I had very supportive parents in that sense. I played sports all growing up, and sports was like definitely defining in terms of characteristics for myself: hard work, teamwork, discipline, and just enjoying kind of life. Even though I was like the shy, quiet kid, I ended up being senior class president my senior year of college or high school. So yeah, kind of did a little bit of everything.
What sports did you play?
I played primarily basketball, 4th grade to high school. And I was actually telling my friend this yesterday. I tore my ACL my junior year of high school and was able to have surgery, rehab it, and come back. And was like comeback player of the year for my senior year of high school.
What position did you play?
They tried to put me at point guard, but I was terrible. So it was usually shooting guard, and I wasn't great at that. But I am an excellent passer. I like to make other people shine. So if I can help you in any way, that's kind of, I think, where that has come from, is like being the assist maker.
When you graduated from high school, what did you think you wanted to do?
I honestly had no idea. I think my head went in a bunch of different directions. I went from wanting to be a writer and like a published author when I used to write and read a lot, to maybe wanting to be a lawyer. And I think it was just, you don't know what you don't know. And so you have to get out into the world and experience that. And you only know the things that you hear about, or like the professions that people have. And I knew I didn't want to go to medical school, although I thought about like sports medicine at one point. I thought that would be cool to be around athletes. And I thought that some kind of career path for me would be like going to law school, being a lawyer. Like that just seemed like a thing that people did. But to be honest, I didn't have a declared major. All I knew was that I was going to the school of my dreams, which is UCLA, and I was going to figure it out at some point. And
why was UCLA the school of your dreams?
When I was applying for colleges, I knew that I probably wanted to get out of the Bay Area. So I just wanted to experience, like, go somewhere different. And for me, when I visited UCLA, the campus, it was just everything that I wanted. And it was like that well-rounded experience of academics, athletics. People just looked like there were beautiful people on campus, and they were so involved in all these different extracurricular activities and doing all these really great things. And I think it was the name more so than anything was like something that resonated with my family as well. I got into Berkeley also. I was deferred to spring semester, and my dad really wanted me to go to Berkeley to stay close to home. And I was like, no, I think I'm ready to go, live on my own for a little bit.
What did you major in?
Like 3 different things. So I think I started undeclared, and as most people do, you're probably going to change your major. I think it's like 2.3 times you change your major in college. So I started undeclared, and then the summer after my freshman year, I took a marketing class, like a marketing 101 class at a JC. Like, oh, this is awesome. I love this. UCLA doesn't have practical majors. They have a business economics program, but it's very like theoretical. So UCLA, very research-based school. And so I was like, oh, marketing sounds really awesome. And it's so funny because my career has kind of been interlaced in and out of marketing, even though I've kind of like not really been drawn to it. And people say that I'm good at it, but I don't know that I necessarily enjoy it. I was like, okay, I need a plan B for that. If I can't do that, I don't really want to do this biz econ thing because that just looks like graphs and charts and math. Another summer I took intro to psychology class, was fascinated by it. I love how people think and even just learning kind of like the science behind it. So I declared psychology at UCLA, which is one of the harder majors for that kind of like, it's a very science-based, like life science type of course at UCLA. So I was taking really hard statistics classes, really hard calculus classes, and I wasn't sure if the science route was more for me. It was very much more of like a writing type of person. And so at that point, I think I was a junior. I was like, how do I get out of college in 4 years? I looked, and sociology seemed to be all of the kind of prerequisites overlap, even though I could have taken the easier classes for sociology. And I started taking some classes, and there's sociology of everything, like history, immigration, gender. I took some of the most fascinating classes at UCLA, and it allowed me to kind of explore like just different like trends and themes and cultures and people, and really enjoyed that.
So what was your favorite sociology course?
Probably sociology of gender. We had to do a group project where kind of like the social constructs of what people think gender is. Our group was 4 girls and 1 guy. And the group project was that we had to dress as the opposite sex, go out into public and pass. So it's like you're thinking about how do I look, mannerisms, talking, all of those things that we think make up that other gender, and us trying to mimic those things and trying to pass as it. So we're, 20-year-old women, and we end up looking like 13-year-old boys that are just like baggy clothes and backwards hats and like trying to draw on like facial hair or something. And then we had the 1 guy, and this was the really interesting thing about him. So he was taller. I think he was Armenian. He was very hairy. So it was actually really hard for him to try and dress as a woman and pass. We went out to 3rd Street Promenade, and he just looked like he was dressing up for Halloween. And it was like, he was not passing at all. But the thing that we noticed was that we were not really getting stares, and we kind of tried to break up and stuff, but he was. And we actually started getting a little concerned for his safety. And so we were kind of keeping a close eye on him just to make sure that because of his appearance, that he wasn't going to get judged or like things were going to happen to him, which is sad that we had to, think about that and still do, like this is 15 years later and we're still facing those types of issues of discrimination and not accepting people.
Yeah, how did he take it?
I think he felt really uncomfortable. And I think he did his best, but it's hard when you're just like, I don't look like a feminine or the construct of a feminine woman in order to pass as one.
Did you work during college?
Yes. The first 2 years, it was kind of just part-time jobs. I actually got a job working at Poly Pavilion in concessions because it was the way that I could get in to see basketball games for free. So I'd work at all the men's basketball games. It was prior to the game through halftime, and then we could go like grab our soda and a hot dog and go find an empty seat and watch the rest of the game. So I did that for 2 years. And then the summer times, I was working at Champ Sports. I was able to transfer from where I was working back home to the Beverly Center here. And so I was like out working off campus. I had a reason to have a car, in LA for the first time. Lots of celebrities came through. So it was an interesting experience then. But I was working a lot. I was working 30 hours a week. And then my final year, I was an RA.
Why did you work so many hours?
I think partially it was my parents were paying for my tuition and I was paying for everything else. And so wanting to spending money and like all of that kind of stuff. And it was also for me, I think just I'd been working since I was like 13 in like unofficial capacities, kind of getting paid cash on the table. And it was just something that I just knew to make my own money to be able to do the things that I wanted to do.
You graduate on time in 4 years.
Yeah, almost on time. So I actually had a medical reason that I had to drop out my spring quarter of my freshman year. I had to have surgery. And so the recovery time is 6 weeks, and they're like, you're not going to be able to go back to school. So we made the decision spring break, I was going to drop out that quarter. and then come back. And so I literally had like an extra quarter and like one class I had to finish over the summertime. But it was one of my favorite classes that I took at UCLA. And it was a Asian American Studies class on mixed race. And so I'm half Japanese, half white. And so going to UCLA was actually the first time that I encountered other people that were kind of like mixed race. And even growing up, I went to really diverse Catholic schools where I just saw all different colors and races and never really identified like one versus the other. But it was the first time that I think I saw people that kind of looked like me. Like a lot of people think that I look Hawaiian or like I get Mexican a lot too. But it was really cool seeing people that were like a little, like you can't quite tell what they are, but you look in their eyes and you're like, I think you're half Asian too. I think you're just like me. And they had like a Hapa club, which is for like, mixed Asian people. And so it was like kind of like this identity of myself was starting to form at that time of, I never really identified as Japanese or white. I always kind of identified as like a hybrid of the two of being mixed. And so it was cool to see that there were studies being done and research being done and, people that there was this growing community of people that are like multicultural, multiracial.
What was one thing that you remember about that class that really helped you to better understand yourself?
Yeah, I think we had a final project that we had to do, and it could be in any form. It could be visual, written, art, like just something that kind of encompassed all that we had learned in terms of our own identity within. And so I kind of wrote this short story of an experience that I had with my mom, her raising me with Japanese like values and traditions and like words and things like that, but I never really felt that there was a Japanese community that I belonged to. I didn't have Japanese friends. My friends growing up were like Filipino and Mexican, like just, mixed. But it allowed me to kind of explore some of the identity issues that I had gone through of not being enough of one or the other. I remember having a Filipino boyfriend in high school, and his mom, when she would introduce me, she would say, this is Miki, she's going to UCLA, and she was like an honor student, this and that. And it was like my resume of things, right? Because that's kind of what Asian parents do. And I always wondered if I was Asian enough in terms of how I looked. And, because even though I wasn't Filipino, like if I had been like full Japanese, would that have been different or something? So it's always something. And even to this day, I think of, for various reasons, like it's always a question that I think comes up with a lot of people. It's like, am I enough? Self-doubt kind of creeps in and things like that, especially with whether it's identity or figuring out where you belong or what you're doing. And yeah, so it was an interesting kind of opportunity to explore that.
So you graduate UCLA. What did you do?
So I knew that I wasn't ready to get a full-time job just yet, but I knew that I had to work. And so through the summertime, I had this one class that I had to take. So I was taking this one class and I was working two kind of part-time jobs. I got a paid internship at an online advertising agency in the Palisades. And then on the complete opposite side of town, I got a marketing coordinator job at Sharky's, the bar in Hermosa Beach.
Okay.
And it was basically, this was my introduction to email collection and newsletters and getting people to come back with different types of promos and things like that. So I was working like...
How did you get those two jobs?
Craigslist.
Craigslist is a great way to find jobs.
It is. And especially I think like whether internships or hourly types of roles and things like that. Yeah, it was Craigslist. And I remember I got the online advertising agency one. It was like we did a group interview, 10 of us or so. I remember one of the questions that they asked us is if you had $100,000 or $500,000 to spend in one day, like what would you do? And I was like, I would buy courtside seats to the Lakers game, and the bosses who were interviewing were all Lakers fans. So
Did you know that?
I didn't. So I think that me, sports, that's also how I sometimes relate to men. And so I did that through the end of the year, and I started interviewing at places and kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. But it was a good...
Did you know, could that internship have turned into a job?
It could have, yeah.
Did you not want it to?
I think I was getting pay increases there. I became like the lead intern, was training other interns. I think I, at some point, had started looking for something a little bit different. And I knew, the one thing that I knew coming out of college was that I wanted to work in digital and online. Like Napster was really big when I went to college, and high-speed internet was just becoming a thing. And I knew that this was something going to be really special. And that was something that I wanted to be a part of. I was looking for something different, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. My boss at the online advertising agency used to work for MGM Studios. executives. And he and his business partner there had basically created MGM Online and the website and like that whole division that they had. And he was like, if you're looking for something like full-time, like something with like some real potential, he's like, my partner is hiring an assistant. I went and I interviewed. We hit it off really well, but he had interviewed somebody right before me that he liked just a little bit better, and she had a little bit more experience as an assistant. And so they went with her. And then right after the holidays, they reached back out. They're like, hey, we just wanted to let you know what happened. Went with somebody else, but we had another opening and we were kind of waiting to see what was going to happen with that because I think they were firing this other girl. Okay. But the guy whose position I was applying for to be his assistant, his boss. So the chief information officer and the two senior vice presidents under him that basically ran the entire IT and tech division for MGM were hiring for their executive assistant. And so they ended up letting that one go, and I interviewed for it and I got it. So I never really thought of like being in a corporate environment. I always thought like, oh, really cool, like movie studio, that would be really fun. And it was interesting to be in like the IT, like tech area, but I learned so much just really sitting at the top with those three executives.
Something that you said earlier that I want to ask you about. You were talking to your boss at the other company and he was telling you about MGM and he was like, well, if you are looking for something else, how were you able to develop?
I can't remember exactly how it came about, but I think the fact that I was an intern and I was hourly and I was kind of like capped. And then I think they knew all the kind of jobs that I've had, just overachiever mentality, and I get bored really easily. I just like to take on more and more and more work. And at some point you kind of max out and there isn't any more to give you. You either say something about it or people will recognize and acknowledge that. I think I've been really fortunate to be around people that recognize and acknowledge that, because I think I'm a little bit more on the like shy, apprehensive side where I might not have felt comfortable with that. But I think it's like, because I knew it was an internship, because I knew it's like, this isn't going to be a forever thing. And I think they recognize that, like, I think you're a talented person and like, we'd love to help you grow in any way that we can. So if it's not here, like if there are other opportunities, like we'd love to kind of help you explore those. And so,
yeah, I always wonder about that, especially when you talk to younger people, like you have this belief that people are just going to recognize and reward you, but sometimes you have to like go out and take it.
Our mutual friend Anastasia actually wrote a Medium post earlier this year, and she was talking about power moves that she had kind of made in her career to get her to where she is right now. And this quote that she said stuck with me, and it was like, no one will provide better agency or advocacy better than myself.
Okay, so you were working at
MGM
as an executive assistant. What did you enjoy about that job?
I think I enjoyed working around a lot of people. And kind of being like the go-to person for a lot of different things. I mean, I was the gatekeeper for 3 senior executive schedules, and it was really cool. I had one, actually, I think she's the only technically female boss that I've ever had. I've only ever had male bosses. And it was really interesting to see her. She was a single parent, had 2 teenage boys, and she made sure that I had on her schedule whenever they had volleyball games, she was there. She was, as busy as she was, as much as she traveled, like that was a priority for her. And that was one of the first times I think I'd seen in the professional world, outside of my own mother, of a woman being able to be successful in business. And she was also Asian. And she was just like this fierce little woman that everybody kind of was scared of, but also respected at the same time. But I think it was working in entertainment, but like on the fringe of entertainment. And so working with the tech teams and kind of understanding the whole world of like databases and servers and application support and websites. And that's what really made me love, I think, that space and wanting to delve more deeper into that side of entertainment.
What skills did you have to develop in order to be good at?
So managing 3 different people's schedules, trying to be one step ahead of all of them.
Was there a hierarchy of who was most important?
So there were 3 of them. There was the chief information officer, and under him were 2 senior vice presidents. One of the senior vice presidents was the female that I mentioned. She was probably the one that needed the most support because she had a larger team and she was traveling a lot. The other senior vice president, super low key, very hands off. And then the CIO also like very low key. And so it was trying to anticipate their needs and their different styles and how they like things. Managing all of their travel. So it's multitasking like a mother, and working with all of like their different teams to ensure that communication was distributed. I had to try to learn Microsoft Project because they would have quarterly project reviews and they would all submit their project plans to me. And then I had to somehow try and figure out how to consolidate them into like one thing.
How do you go about figuring things out?
So I think I tried asking somebody for help at one point. And because we have the IT team there, it's like, hey, you know how to use this, right? Can you help me with this? And knowing when to ask for help at some point. But sometimes it's just kind of like getting in there.
Is there something that you did there that you were really proud of?
It was really feeling like I was indisposable to them and that I could anticipate those needs. And so the next role that I was able to take on was actually the director of online that I originally interviewed for. He had an opening. And so when he had an opportunity open up, he's like, I'd love to consider you for this if you're interested. And by that time I'd been there for a year and a half and they knew like, you're 24 years old, you're ready to go on and do something new. So it's time for you to grow, but we're happy that you can grow like within this team.
Okay. So you transitioned and you got to work with
the online team. Yeah.
What did you do there?
Liaising with all the teams to see what they wanted to promote for that month. As well as like supporting any of the ongoing email blasts that we were doing specifically to like a new movie release or things like that.
What did you have to develop in order to be really good at that job?
So one of the process kind of was we had a template and it was an HTML, CSS template that we just swapped out things every month.
How many people were involved?
I ended up owning it. I took it over from somebody else who was kind of working on other projects, but it was typically just myself and like a production person who would resize images for me and update if I had changes to make, the copy and stuff like that. There was a point where I was like, I don't want to keep relying on this person to do these things for me. I'm just going to learn how to do this myself. And so I kind of like hacked through teaching myself HTML and CSS, just how to edit certain things in the copy. And if an image was wrong or like needed to be resized or there's something wrong with it, then I started learning Photoshop because they put the wrong image in. So like I'm going to swap it out. I was really learning on the fly how to do that. Proofreading and being really detail oriented because when you're sending out newsletters to that many people and you don't want there to be a dead link or a typo.
After that, you went to Atomic?
Yeah. So in the middle of that, the company got bought by a consortium of companies that was led by Sony and some investment firms. I saw our entire department kind of diminish. And because I was probably the most inexpensive resource, they kept me on and then I just added on responsibility. I was there from age 23 to 25 and I was working with people that were predominantly 20 to 30 years older than me in the IT department. And I wanted to work around people my own age and I wanted to be in an innovative team. And so I remember looking online and just around the corner was 20th Century Fox. And they had this position at this brand new startup division called Fox Atomic. And they were building their team. They had their like vice president of digital in place and he was hiring his team. They're looking for a coordinator. It was essentially doing the same exact job that I was doing. This is the only time in my entire career that I've applied for a job online through an online portal, gotten an interview and gotten hired. Every other way has been through some unconventional method. And so I think it's because it was a very similar fit and it like worked out.
Could you envision like how you could do more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think because it was a startup division, the team there had only been placed for like a couple of months and we were launching. I started, I think it was June. We were launching our website at Comic-Con the next month. So everything that we were doing was for the team to like do this big unveiling of we were in the process of filming the remake of Revenge of the Nerds. And that was
a remake?
There wasn't. There was going to be. And so that was going to be our coming out of announcing this new studio. And so fun for a multitude of reasons of startup culture and feeling, being around people that are my own age, going to Comic-Con, like having this experience. Like the team kind of like dynamic and collaboration that happened that went into like doing that launch was incredible. And it was so exciting to be a part of that, of like the early stages of that team and seeing it grow from there. And so that's kind of in terms of the expectations that I had of going into a team that I knew was doing something that wasn't really being done before and had really innovative thinkers behind it. Didn't know exactly what to expect, but I knew it would be completely different from anything that I'd done before.
So what would you say would be a skill that you developed working
there? So I think that's where I actually learned. So coming from MGM, I kind of got my hands into production of emails and websites and microsites and kind of how the internet and websites work and a little bit of like the HTML and CSS and just kind of like the basic stuff. And then when I went to Fox Atomic, it was project managing the development of this application. And so software application development, working with developers and designers and how all that works, and essentially being the product manager for this application before I knew what product management was. And it was just, I was always been in the position of I'm somebody's lieutenant and right hand. And then it was like our director of development. And I was responsible for all the timelines and making sure everything was on track and QAing and testing and finding initial users and marketing and doing a little bit of everything. So wearing lots of different hats. So continuing to wear multiple hats, but really kind of diving into the space of application and software development and what that was all about.
Cool. So what contributed to you leaving Fox?
Yeah. So the director of development that I was working for at the time got another opportunity to join another company he had actually met at Comic-Con. They were a software development company. I wasn't sure the direction I think that the company was going in, and a little foreshadowing, I guess, because the division ended up shutting down 4 months later. And I think I was ready to kind of jump into, I wanted to make more money, I wanted to do more things. And so this opportunity to work with another solely software development company, I think that's what I was really excited about. I think I was done working in entertainment, and I really found my passion working in software development there and building products and online communities and things like that. So the opportunity came up and I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. So I left Fox Atomic to go to a company. It used to be called Planet White Games and it was called Mashon. At the time, it was in Orange County. It was a desktop software development company. They produced a couple of online games, and then their kind of big offering was this thing called the comic book creator. It allowed you to create your own comic books using templates and page layouts, and they wanted to take that desktop software completely online. And they saw what we had done, building this kind of online video content blending type of application. And they're like, can you do the same thing for us? Can you take what we want and put it online? So we're like, yeah, we can do that.
So what did you enjoy about that job, and what skills did you need in order to be successful?
Yeah, so I kind of continued on with project management, and it was developing managing the projects for our website, for the application, working on multiple projects, helping build out the team. So we had to hire new talent that was equipped with the skills that we needed to, all the engineers that we had were used to building desktop software. So now we needed ones that were equipped to develop in Flash and online. The company started off in Orange County and kind of hijacked it and moved it to LA. There was more talent in terms of opportunity that we could hire from. The talent pool was larger here in LA. And we essentially just rebuilt the team here in LA. And so I was with that company for 6 years and just kind of seeing it from where it went then to building this Flash-based comic book creator, to realizing that nobody wants to make comic books online, really. So how can we make the technology that we've built for creating these different types of page templates, how can we monetize off of that? And it was like, well, if people don't necessarily want to make books, but they might want to make a t-shirt or a coffee mug or a cell phone case. And so we transitioned it into a product customization platform. We were able to develop a kind of end-to-end solution that it was on-demand printing. So you create the design, and that way you can kind of test out design, see what works, see what doesn't work, and the item isn't printed until somebody actually buys it. And so it drastically reduces upfront costs, and it could be used by anybody from large corporations to independent t-shirt owners. It basically enabled anybody to become an e-commerce store in that sense. And so we were trying to build out kind of like a SaaS-based model of it. So it's like a shop in a box type of thing where if you've got a store, you want to integrate this into it, cool, you can do that. And then we have this enterprise side where we're custom building stores and integrations for different brands and large clients in that way. While I'm not technically trained in any nature, I could sit in on almost any conversation. And a lot of times I was the one that they brought into meetings because I was the one that could say, is this something that we can do or we can't do? And actually the salespeople didn't like bringing me into meetings because I was the realistic one, because I would hear what they were selling. And I'm like, we can't do that. And I was the one that was responsible essentially for all of our client deliverables. Again, just being willing to take on more, learn more, do more.
So you were there for 6 years. Mm-hmm. How did you know you were ready to leave?
the company shut down because I came in at a transition. Everybody who had been there before me had since left. My boss at the time had also left. I felt like I had dedicated so much of myself to it. At the time that we shut down, I was the vice president of operations and I was second in command to our CEO. And so I had ticked off all the boxes in terms of like my career ladder that I wanted. You know, I got the title that I wanted, the pay that I wanted, like all of these things. And I felt like I had accomplished so much. But I had this feeling of like, I didn't really necessarily enjoy like what we were building. I did it because I was like, I want to see this work. I want to see this succeed. We're so close to something here. And there was so much potential there. But I think it was like knowing when to maybe walk away. And I put all of that before me because I didn't want to like let my team down, like to leave before them. But I was just so invested in it that I was ready to go down like the Titanic. And I did. I was literally the last person on payroll to help like shut down the company. I had no idea what I wanted to do next. And it really allowed me to kind of take stock in what I enjoyed about what I was doing before and what I didn't like and what I wanted in kind of my next opportunity.
What were those?
I knew that I loved building, coming from like building something online, seeing the creation of a product, seeing people use it, getting their feedback on it, iterating on it, working with dev and design teams. I love being in the thick of that and really enjoyed the process of it. I learned that I didn't really enjoy the services side of the industry. And so I knew that I don't think I could ever work for an agency necessarily again. It was building things for other people. I mean, there's one thing when you're building like your own platform, but when you're building stores for other people, when you're building applications for other people and they have their own input and they don't listen to you or they want things done a certain way or like the timelines and schedules of managing multiple different projects at the same time. And if a developer gets sick or they quit or something happens, it's like I wanted to build something that I wholeheartedly believed in, that I was passionate about, that I was excited about.
How did you take what you learned about yourself, find your next job?
I literally had no life outside of work, so I wasn't really going to any tech events. I also didn't feel like, even though we were a startup and we were working in tech, I didn't feel like I belonged to the startup community, but I just felt like there are all these different brands and companies out there that'd be so cool to work for because they have name recognition and brand value and all of these things. And I just didn't feel like I belonged in that yet. So I found myself January 1st, 2014, unemployed for the first time in my life with no idea what I was doing next. I remember being offered a contract project and it was the pay that I wanted and it was doing exactly what I had been doing. And I was working on a back end of a financial services website and I was not excited about it at all. And I mean, the team was really cool and again, the product. And I was like, no, I don't think this is the right move for me to make. And I'll find something. In downtown, I'm like, where do I go to meet people, connect? Couldn't find anything. And then I remember I've been a fan of General Assembly since its inception in New York. And I remember actually writing down on an Evernote, like bucket list of things I want to do was to bring General Assembly to LA. But then they came to LA. So I was like, cool, this is awesome. Went to a few things, took like a couple maybe free classes that they had there. And so at this time, I saw on Eventbrite that they were doing business development for startups class. And at the time I was working with a friend that's kind of like an advisor to his startup and he wanted some help with business development. And I'm like, I don't really know much about that. So let me learn. Yeah. And then I saw this class and then they canceled the class. At that point, I was just like, why aren't they doing more out here? And so I reached out on Twitter to, I was following the regional director at the time, Sarah Tilton. And I was like, oh, I want to follow like the important people that work at the places that I really admire. So I reached out to the DTLA Twitter account and Sarah, and I was like, hey, are you guys thinking about expanding, your offering outside of the West Side, like classes or events or anything, like to the East Side, like Hollywood or downtown? And she responded back and she's like, yeah, we're actually thinking about it. What would you like to see? And I was like, I have some ideas and it's more than 140 characters. Can I email you? Yeah. And she's like, yeah, absolutely. I was also I used to volunteer for a nonprofit called Stoked. It's a action sports-based mentoring program for at-risk youth. And it teaches surfboarding, skateboarding, and snowboarding to kids. It's the life skills that you learn through doing hard, kind of adventurous things, communication, teamwork, community, getting up when you fall down, like those types of things. I was talking to the founder. He had this endowment for this really cool innovation lab that he wanted to build out in their Brooklyn office. And he's like, I need some programming ideas. What should I do? And I was like, what about like an entrepreneurship program? A lot of what you teach is like the foundations of entrepreneurship. And wouldn't it be cool to provide this as like a base layer of like a summer program for these kids to learn? And wouldn't it be cool to give them the foundational layer of what it means to be an entrepreneur so that if they have ideas for something, they know how to take those next steps? And so I was like, oh, GA could be a really cool partner for this. Yeah. And so the email that I wrote was kind of like starting with that. And then it was also so, I'm based in downtown LA. I have some free time right now. Is there anything I can do to help you guys with your expansion? I got an email back. She's like, I love all of this. I'm forwarding this to our head of expansion. And set up a phone call with them. And then it was just like a couple phone calls and in-person coffee chats. And then they ended up bringing me on to lead the expansion for downtown LA. We started just working out of co-working spaces and running classes. A lot of people on this side of town had heard about GA, and the reception that I got was really similar. They were so excited that we were bringing programming and content and classes and making it more accessible to people. So that's how I went from being unemployed to employed.
Did you think at that time, like, how could I position this to get hired by General Assembly?
I think at that point it was just like, is there an opportunity? Like, this is a problem that I have. Is this a problem that you're seeing also? And it was kind of like a selfish need, because I would like to see this happen here. And is there anything that I can do to make this happen here? Again, it was the idea of being able to build something from the ground up. It was actually something completely foreign to me. I didn't do events ever before. That was essentially the role that I had. They're like, okay, your first job is you have to throw a party in 2 weeks, and you have to figure out how to get people there. And here's your budget. And I just started racking my brain of like, what would I do? What's the easiest way that I can get someone to come to something, reduce the barrier of entry? They don't have to buy a ticket to something. They don't have to pay for a drink. They're coming to be associated with this cool new brand. And so what we actually ended up doing was the brilliant idea of one of my colleagues when we were trying to figure out where we're going to have this first party. And he was like, why don't you just make it a secret location? The first one went so well, they're like, okay, just keep doing this. So we did 4 weekly happy hours the very first month that I came on board. And so it was really cool just like learning how to build community through these like shared experiences and opportunities. And that was kind of like the foundation for that whole role. So I started at General Assembly in May of 2014. And around that time, it was just kind of like meeting the people in downtown, like where is the community here? Who's doing something? Somebody's got to be doing something. And just talking to people and being like, oh, you need to meet this person. It was just like this concentric circles of everybody pointing in all these different directions. And then ultimately the 7 of us that are the original co-founders of Grid110 kind of came together right around the same time that I started at GA. And it was like, we all live or work in downtown. We are invested in seeing how we can help support the community and ecosystem grow here. And we met unofficially just for like a year. And so a year later, kind of the problem that we decided that we wanted to solve was space. And it was the appropriate type of space for startups things. So we're like, what if we could get building who has empty office space, who wants to attract tech and creative companies and fill it with startups? And so that was kind of like the initial idea of it. And we would do that with multiple different buildings. And maybe we'll focus each building on a different vertical. And so we're like, okay, fashion tech seems to be the thing that makes sense to start with because of downtown LA and Los Angeles. And then we kind of realized we can't just take an empty space and throw startups in there. Like, they need infrastructure, they need Wi-Fi, they need, utilities. And then we have to be able to measure progress or success, or like that this is something that's viable. So what we ultimately came out with and launched in 2015 was a 6-month accelerator style program. And so we would kind of incubate 5 companies in the fashion tech space with free office space, mentoring resources, access to advisors, and get them ready for whatever that like next milestone step was for them. I wasn't as hands-on as I would have liked to have been, because I think I was the only one who didn't work for myself. But it was definitely, I felt like it was hard because most of our team was working out of the space because they were running their own businesses out of the space. And so they could be there and they had face-to-face interactions with all the startups. And it was harder for me to do that. And so I think that was one of the things that I struggled with over the past 2 years, was not feeling like I could devote as much time and effort and energy as I wanted to it. But that's changing.
Yeah. So then you decided to leave General Assembly. Yeah. Did you know that the role full-time at Grid110 was a strong possibility?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's essentially why I left. Okay. We are a economic and community development organization first and foremost. Okay. We're a nonprofit, and we just want to see companies succeed here in downtown. We want them to graduate from our program, get office space in downtown, hire people in downtown, be successful in downtown. And so that's kind of our benchmark and measure of success. And what we've seen happen with our companies is doing exactly that. We've kind of moved away from like the formal accelerator model, still trying to kind of figure out what we're calling it.
What skills are required to be successful in your job?
Yeah, so I think there's, on the hard skilled side, it's a lot of project management and program development and figuring out what is it that has worked in the past that we want to maintain moving forward with these programs. Being able to kind of project manage anything from a new website to events that we want to do to hiring interns and like overseeing them to do certain things, and then the actual program management itself, as well as any external facing business development, partnerships, working with the community, funding, getting additional funding. And I think I mentioned earlier that I'm so used to being somebody's like first lieutenant. And, I'm just the go-to person. Like, I got you, boss. Like, whatever you need, I'm going to get it done. And I never really saw this for myself, but this was the prime opportunity for me to kind of step into that like commander-in-chief role, of being the one that's like figuring out the strategic vision and the program development and how are we going to raise money and like our own startup within a startup. And it's terrifying. Coming from something like General Assembly, brand recognition, well-funded, mission-based company that people who know it love it, and has all the directions kind of provided for you, which is sometimes good, sometimes bad, to stepping into something where you have to define the metrics and you have to figure out how can we be a fundable entity? What are people going to invest in when it comes to whether it's corporate social responsibility divisions or grants or foundations? What is it that we're doing that is different and meaningful that they want to help support that? The opportunity is huge, but yeah, it's terrifying.
So on the flip side, let's talk about flat sides. So flat sides are an aspect or a skill that you have chosen deliberately not to nurture.
Yeah, so I'd never heard that term before. I thought that was really interesting. I was like, oh, no, that's really good. Yeah, sales. I feel like I'm really good about asking for things if it's in a partnership capacity or if it's like an in-kind thing. So I have no problem reaching out to sponsors, asking for product. Because we're a nonprofit, it seems to be a really easy ask. Space is not a problem for me. Marketing partnerships, asking for somebody to kind of spread the word about something. No qualms about doing anything. But when it comes to somebody, when it's monetarily related, I struggle with that. Corporations and people that are interested in getting involved with Grid110, they kind of like leave it open to what are the opportunities to get involved? And so it's easy for me to talk about the one-off events, or mentoring, or if you want to come in and do like a lunch and learn with the startups and things like that, of like the ways, the valuable ways that you could be spending your time with the organization. And then some people, they just want to write a check, but it's like the hardest ask for me to talk about that. It's very sensitive for me and I need to get over that.
When you need a boost of confidence, what do you do?
Probably literally by going to the gym. I got into kind of like weightlifting about a year ago, and it's a great stress relief. So I am prone to getting really bad like tension headaches and migraines. And since making working out a part of my like just weekly schedule, have noticed that my stress levels have reduced. I'm sleeping better. I'm feeling better about myself. The other thing I would just say is just like dancing around my apartment.
Do you have a go-to song?
I've heard it so many times at this point and I don't get sick of it, but Despacito.
Have you seen that little girl where I don't know if it's her dad or it's a parent or someone kept playing the song and she'd be like, oh, but then she would start dancing to it. What is something you're embarrassed to admit that you like?
I mean, my immediate answer is terrible reality TV. It's like,
what's your
guilty pleasure? Anything Bravo, Real Housewives, like all of that nonsensical stuff. It was just kind of, it's like a fun like escape and from reality and like have something on in the background.
Okay, so I have this book and it's called Listography, and it's a book where you can kind of do a biography of yourself through lists.
Okay.
So pick an odd number between 5 and 135, and I'm going to give you something to list.
21.
Number 21. Ooh, this is a good one. The people you love the most.
Oh, well, at the top of that list are my parents. I consider them my lifelong heroes. I think just for a variety of different reasons. I have a handful of people that I consider my nearest and dearest, like closest friends. For a long time, I kept my circle very small, and I think it was because I wasn't really meeting a lot of people. So it was like high school best friend, my college best friend, and then through GA and just like all of the stuff that I've done in the past 3 years, I've just met some of the most exceptional people in my life who I admire, who I think of as role models, and inspire and motivate me every day. My dogs, I am on the fence as to whether I want to have kids or not, and it's situational for me. I think if I'm with the person and I can see that happening, like great. But I'm also approaching the point where I'm like, it might be a little late, but adoption, I guess, is always an option. So for now, dogs.
What type of dogs do you have?
I have two. I have a Chihuahua Corgi named Darla, and I have a Black Lab mix named Baron.
Squad care instead of self-care.
Yeah.
So who are the people that you turn to when you need help?
Yeah, my friend Kat. So we worked at GA together. She was actually my, the first kind of impression, physical in-person impression that I had of GA. She was there. And she was one of the first people because she had essentially done my role within launching GA when it first came to Santa Monica, of being kind of like that audience development marketing person. And she knew everybody. So she kind of sat me down. She's like, these are all the people that I need to introduce you to. These are all the mailing lists that you need to get on. And since then, like, we just become, she's one of my best friends. There's just so much about her that I admire. And a lot of times I'm like, what would Kat do? Mm-hmm. And so she's definitely somebody that I come to, and I get very objective opinions, and she's not afraid to be like, why do you feel that way? Or you need to stop saying that. And it's like just being tough love with a wrapper of empathy around it.
I think something you just said that it's like really important, and a lot of people don't have someone like that. When you said, well, she told me the people that I need to know mm-hmm. and the list I should be a part of. And a lot with finding opportunities. Yeah. It's about knowing what's out there. Yep. And if you don't have anyone in your circle that knows that, then it's becomes a little bit harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of like how I feel like I want Grid110 to be. Mm-hmm. So when people are trying to plug in and connect with community here, it doesn't have to be through necessarily our programs. It's just knowing what else is out here. So knowing that like Pixel Exchange is a resource, knowing that there are 10 different co-working spaces in the area, knowing who the companies are, who's hiring, where are the different resources that I can go to for X, Y, Z. I'm a creative. What are the events for me? And so we want to be kind of like that hub for people that they can tap into, where they can find whatever it is they're looking for. And a lot of that is just us imparting our knowledge and the things that we know and connecting the dots for people.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I want to do with this podcast, is letting people know who else is out there.
Yeah.
Who is one of your possibility models?
Another term that I was like, I had never heard that phrase before, and I thought it was really cool that you explained it. There are two that I think are really prominent in doing things that I would like to aspire to do or have thought about doing. One of them is Arlen Hamilton with Backstage Capital, and raising a fund and investing in women and minority entrepreneurs. And, not coming from a traditional background at all, and learning how to do it, and kind of, it was definitely, I think, a hard road for her, as she has definitely admitted on her podcast and when she's spoken. But she saw a gap and a need, and she did something about it. And I think that there's just something about somebody who you can talk about change, or you can actually do something about it and be that catalyst for change. And so I think she's one. And then Kimberly Bryant from Black Girls Code, who I was reading up about her and her background in like electrical engineering and having this storied career. And then coming to the concept of this idea when her daughter was like, I want to learn how to code. Where can I go to do that? And, not finding programs that were directed towards girls like her or even girls. And so she created it because she didn't see it. And so I feel like that's a pattern that I've seen, is that if it doesn't exist, that you should create it.
And that's who you are.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of like the model that I follow. The people that I admire are people that see a gap or something that they want to change because they notice that as a problem for themselves, and they do something about it.
Yeah. If people wanted to find you and look at your amazing Instagram stories, I'm already telling you how to put that one out there. How should they, or where should they?
Yeah, I'm at Mixter on all pretty much all social media. So Mikster. It's a nickname that my grandma and my dad gave me when I was a kid.
So the name of this podcast is How She Did It. If you could go back in time and give your younger self some career advice, what would you say?
I think the biggest thing for me is I don't feel like I took a lot of risks. I think I played it safe. I stayed at companies and roles for longer than maybe I should have. I'm born and raised in California, and I've never left California in terms of like living. I think there are times where I wish I maybe had moved to New York, or I don't necessarily have a desire to move back to the Bay Area, even though that's kind of where the hub of tech is, or even moving internationally. And so I think just it's doing the things that you're scared of, getting out of your comfort zone, and exploring. And even if it was just like living overseas for a semester or doing more study abroad stuff, or after college, exploring a little bit more. So I think it's just taking those risks, knowing that where you think you're going to end up is not where you're going to end up. And that's totally okay. Yeah. And being comfortable, I think, with that, and just the opportunities that you have. Things happen for a reason, and things will kind of lead you in different directions. And I think just learning as much as you can along the way.
And there you have it. I really enjoyed chatting with Miki. So I want to do a quick debrief on the episode and share some things that I learned. Number one, to how she is handling a loss of benefits by going from General Assembly to Grid110. She's the only employee, and more than likely she lost her benefits, like her medical insurance, her 401k or retirement plan. And I'm sure she has options, and she figured all of that out before she left. But I wish that I would have asked her about this, and also whether the loss of those benefits were a cause for concern when she left GA. Number two, something I learned, two things. First thing I learned was I didn't know that Miki was half Japanese. I knew she was Asian, but I was unsure what she was. And number two, I also learned that there was in the works a Revenge of the Nerds sequel. So it's probably for the best that didn't happen, but didn't know that. And then number three, thinking about skills development. And that's one of the reasons why I asked people like what skills they had to develop in each job. And so one of the things that Miki talked about in her current role was that her flat side was selling. So remember, a flat side is something that you have chosen not to develop. Don't think of it as a weakness. So I went to Amazon to see if I could find a couple of resources that could help all of us who may struggle with being able to sell and ask for money. And I discovered a book, and it is by Laura Fredericks, and the name of the book is called The Ask. Now, there is an older version. The first version came out in 2009, and there is a newer version that is currently on pre-order. It hasn't been released yet, but it's coming out in October. So the original version had really great reviews on Amazon, and probably why Laura is re-releasing it. If that's something that you would like to develop, there's a resource. Each episode, I like to dedicate a song to my guests. I am dedicating the non-Justin Bieber version of Despacito in Miki's honor. We talked about that. That's one of our favorite songs. I like it. I actually have both versions of it. The one with Justin Bieber and then the one without. If you want to listen to that song, you can go to the show notes. I will link to a version of that song on the show notes page. And then also I have a master Spotify playlist where I will add all of the songs that I dedicate to each guest. My final thing is I want to hear from you, standouts. During the course of our conversation, Miki mentioned that she has found that sports are a great way to relate to men. What I'd like to hear from you is which of your interests has helped you relate to others at work. So in 30 to 60 seconds, tell me a specific story of relating to someone over a common interest. How did you discover it? And how it affected your working relationship with that person. Send your audio to podcast@notthestandout.club, and then I'm going to compile some of the responses into a mini episode that I'll release at a later date. The email address, as well as the show notes, which includes links to things we talked about, can be found at notthestandout.club/1.